It is July 22nd, 1943. The location is the dusty, sun-scorched terrain outside Modica in Sicily. A young soldier named James Webley presses himself against a stone wall, his heart pounding with such violence he is certain the enemy can hear it. In his hand, he grips what can only be described as a crudely fashioned cylinder of death, approximately the size of a large tin of biscuits, coated in a substance that feels disturbingly sticky to the touch. Before him, no more than 30 meters distant, a German Panzer IV tank rumbles into view, its engine growling like some prehistoric beast, its turret swivelling methodically across the landscape in search of British positions. Webley knows he has seconds to act. Every instinct screams at him to abandon this plan, to disappear into the maze of Sicilian alleyways and let someone else deal with the mechanical monstrosity bearing down upon him. But he has been trained for precisely this moment, trained to do something so utterly illogical, so fundamentally at odds with self-preservation, that generations of military theorists would struggle to believe it ever worked at all. He draws a deep breath, counts to 3, and moves. What happens in the next 10 seconds will become the stuff of legend, not because of tactical brilliance or innovative engineering, but because of something far more remarkable: the triumphant success of what many, then and now, would consider the most ridiculous anti-tank weapon ever conceived by the British armed forces. This is the story of the sticky bomb, a weapon born of desperation, manufactured in haste and deployed with a mixture of courage and resignation that defines the British fighting spirit when all else has failed. The summer of 1940 was, by any measure, Britain's darkest hour. The German blitzkrieg had swept across Europe with terrifying efficiency, and the French, who were supposed to anchor the Western defense against Nazi aggression, had collapsed in a matter of weeks. British forces had been hastily evacuated from Dunkirk, leaving behind most of their heavy equipment and anti-tank capabilities. The Wehrmacht's panzers, particularly the Panzer III and IV variants, represented something the British Army had scarcely encountered before: mobile, armored firepower that could penetrate conventional infantry defenses and wreak catastrophic damage upon exposed troops. The military establishment faced a crisis of existential proportions. Anti-tank guns, the primary means of defeating armored vehicles, were heavy, cumbersome, and required specialized training. Many had been lost in France. The surviving guns were too few in number, and they moved too slowly to keep pace with British infantry retreating in disorganized fashion across the home counties. The requirement was urgent and seemingly impossible. Britain needed a weapon that any infantryman could operate with minimal training, a weapon that was cheap enough to produce in vast quantities, and, most critically, a weapon that could be deployed immediately with the material already available. Standard anti-tank rifles had proven inadequate, bouncing off the thickened armor of the latest German tanks. Grenades and bombs, whilst useful against softer targets, simply lacked the concentrated force needed to penetrate tank armor. Military engineers found themselves in a position of almost comical desperation. They were tasked with creating an effective tank-killing weapon using technology that was barely more advanced than what had been available during the First World War. The statistics painted a grim picture. A single panzer division could field more than 150 tanks, whilst Britain's inventory of effective anti-tank weapons could be counted on 2 hands. The gap between what existed and what was desperately needed had never seemed wider. Officers spoke in hushed tones of the possibility of German invasion, of panzers rolling through the English countryside, of a military collapse that would leave the nation defenseless. Something had to be done, and it had to be done quickly. In the cluttered workshops and improvisation centers of the War Office, minds turned to an old principle: if you cannot penetrate armor from the front, what if you could stick an explosive to it and detonate the charge in direct contact? The idea was not revolutionary. Soldiers had been using improvised magnetic charges against vehicles in various conflicts, but the British needed something simpler, something that required no electricity and no complicated mechanisms. something that could be manufactured not in months, but in weeks. The man who would oversee the development of this weapon was Lieutenant Colonel Stuart McCrae, working in conjunction with Major John Perring of the Engineer Corps. Men who possessed exactly the sort of resourceful, no-nonsense approach that the situation demanded. Rather than designing something from first principles, which would take months and resources Britain simply did not possess, McCrae and Perring would improvise from existing components. The thinking was elegant in its desperation. Why reinvent the wheel when the wheel already existed? Rather than develop a completely new explosive charge, they would utilize what the Army already had in abundance. The result was startling in its simplicity. Take a Mills bomb, the standard British hand grenade, proven reliable and familiar to every infantryman who had trained in the past decade, wrap it in a covering of adhesive compound, add a rod or handle to make it easier to grip and throw, and you had your weapon. This was not engineering at its most sophisticated. This was engineering stripped down to its absolute essentials, pursuing function at the expense of elegance. The adhesive material was critical. It had to be sticky enough to adhere to metal surfaces even at odd angles or in poor weather, but not so sticky that it would accidentally detonate when being transported or handled. The answer came from a compound called beeswax mixed with rosin and other substances, creating a tacky paste that remained stable yet possessed excellent adhesive properties. The finished grenade was covered with a thin paper coating to prevent it from becoming irrevocably stuck to everything it encountered during manufacture and distribution. The cylindrical body was approximately 15 centimeters in length and weighed around 340 grams, making it compact enough to carry in quantity yet substantial enough to deliver a serious explosive charge. The most ingenious aspect was the handle. Not a permanent feature, but a removable wooden rod that was inserted into a socket on the grenade's base. This served two purposes. It provided leverage for throwing, and, more importantly, it prevented the arming mechanism from activating until the rod was removed. The design, officially designated the Grenade Anti-Tank No. 74, ST, though everyone called it the sticky bomb, was rushed into production at factories across Britain. The manufacturing process was refreshingly straightforward. Standard Mills bomb grenades were received from existing production, the adhesive coating was applied, the handles were attached, and the finished weapons were packed into crates. Production numbers remain somewhat unclear, with estimates ranging from 2.5 million to over 5 million units manufactured during the war. The ambiguity reflects the somewhat chaotic nature of wartime production, where documentation was frequently incomplete and manufacturing facilities changed their output according to shifting strategic priorities. What is clear is that the British Army possessed an unprecedented quantity of a weapon that was either going to prove brilliantly effective or catastrophically dangerous to its own users. The operational deployment of the sticky bomb began in earnest during 1941 and accelerated following Britain's entry into the North African campaign. Training in the weapon's use was necessarily rapid and somewhat grim. Soldiers were told to approach tanks from the side or rear if possible. Approaching from the front was essentially suicidal, as the Panzer's front-facing machine guns could cut down an infantryman before he had covered half the distance. The technique involved removing the wooden handle, which involved a simple twisting motion, then throwing the grenade with as much force as possible at the target, aiming for the thinner side armor rather than the heavily reinforced turret. The moment of contact was critical. The beeswax coating had to adhere properly, which meant the throw had to be forceful and accurate. A gentle lob would result in the sticky bomb sliding off the tank's sloped armor and detonating harmlessly nearby. The problem was that once the wooden rod was removed, the soldier had approximately 10 seconds before the internal percussion detonator would trigger the explosive charge. This meant that if the throw was inaccurate, or if the grenade failed to stick, the soldier had mere seconds to get clear of the blast radius. In practice, this meant that many soldiers who deployed sticky bombs never made it back alive. The statistics are grimly illustrative. Estimates suggest that for every successful sticky bomb deployment against a tank, At least 2 additional soldiers were killed or seriously wounded in the attempt. This was not a weapon for the faint-hearted, nor was it a weapon for those who harbored any illusions about their own safety. During the Battle of Kasserine Pass in Tunisia in February 1943, elements of the British First Army faced repeated attacks by German panzers. Reports from that engagement describe soldiers deliberately running towards tanks with sticky bombs, accepting almost certainly fatal outcomes in the knowledge that their sacrifice might slow the German advance. At Gafsa, also in Tunisia, a small group of British sappers managed to disable 3 Panzer III tanks using sticky bombs, though at a cost of 14 killed and 8 wounded. In Sicily, during Operation Husky in July 1943, the weapon saw repeated use. Lieutenant Colonel John Renton's account describes soldiers moving with almost dreamlike determination towards targets, completely aware of the odds they faced. The weapon's psychological impact on German tankers was considerable. Unlike anti-tank guns, which crews could spot and engage from a distance, a sticky bomb attack could come with virtually no warning. A soldier could emerge from a ruined building, throw his grenade, and vanish before the tank's gunners could react. This created a pervasive sense of vulnerability that rippled through panzer units. Tank commanders began rotating their turrets constantly, searching for threats that might emerge at any moment. Crews were instructed never to open hatches whilst near built-up areas. The presence of sticky bombs, even in small quantities, could modify German tactical doctrine in ways that far exceeded the weapon's actual lethality. If you are finding this fascinating, I genuinely think a quick subscribe to the channel would mean more than you know. The algorithm is rather unforgiving with documentary content, so every subscription helps ensure these stories continue to reach people who appreciate them. The question of how the sticky bomb compared with alternatives is illuminating and reveals much about the different strategic approaches adopted by each combatant nation. The Germans possessed the Panzerfaust, a shaped-charge anti-tank weapon that was significantly more effective and considerably safer for its operator than the British sticky bomb. The Panzerfaust utilized a precision-engineered hollow charge that could penetrate heavy armor with remarkable reliability, often punching through the thickest tank plates available. A Panzerfaust operator could engage a target from 60 to 100 meters away, or occasionally even further with excellent visibility, whilst sticky bomb soldiers had to approach to within throwing distance, roughly 15 to 20 meters at maximum, often far closer. The Panzerfaust had a shaped warhead that was far more efficient at converting explosive energy into penetrating force, creating a focused jet of superheated metal rather than relying on general blast effect. The Germans also developed the Panzerschreck, a larger, recoilless weapon that was essentially a portable anti-tank gun, firing a shaped charge projectile from a rail-mounted launcher. In direct comparison, these weapons were unquestionably superior to the sticky bomb in virtually every measurable respect. An infantryman with a Panzerfaust had a genuine chance of defeating a tank and surviving the encounter, with casualty rates among operators considerably lower than their British equivalents. An infantryman with a sticky bomb had a considerably lesser chance of achieving either objective. The Americans, characteristically, pursued a different solution with the bazooka, a smoothbore rocket launcher that fired shaped charge projectiles. The bazooka was far more sophisticated than the sticky bomb, featured superior range and accuracy, and was considerably safer to operate from a psychological perspective, even if recoil and blast effects posed their own hazards. Yet the bazooka was not available in great quantities during the early war years, and the development and production of such a weapon required significant resources, manufacturing expertise, and technological capabilities. The sticky bomb, by contrast, required nothing that Britain could not produce within existing capacity. It required no new manufacturing facilities, no exotic materials, no specialized knowledge, no precision engineering beyond what the Mills Bomb Factory already performed daily. This was not a weapon designed by engineers with unlimited resources pursuing the optimal solution. It was a weapon designed by engineers working under absolute constraints of time, resources, and desperation. In this context, the sticky bomb was not stupid at all. It was pragmatic in the extreme. Whilst the Germans and Americans pursued technological sophistication, the British pursued immediate availability. They sacrificed safety and effectiveness for sheer quantity and simplicity of production. And in the brutal calculus of war, having 1,000,000 mediocre anti-tank weapons might actually prove superior to having 10,000 excellent ones that take months to produce. The actual historical impact of the sticky bomb remains difficult to quantify with precision. Tank losses attributable directly to sticky bomb attacks are not comprehensively recorded in surviving documentation. Various sources cite different figures. Some suggest that sticky bomb attacks accounted for the destruction of fewer than 200 tanks throughout the entire war. Others claim the figure was significantly higher. The uncertainty reflects the nature of historical records. Combat reports are sometimes contradictory, circumstances are often unclear, and the credit for destroying a tank is frequently disputed between different units and different weapon systems. What is unquestionable is that the sticky bomb achieved something psychologically significant. It removed the sense that tanks were invulnerable. A soldier armed with a sticky bomb could make a German panzer commander nervous. He might not succeed. Statistically, he probably would not succeed. But he possessed an option that had not existed previously. Before the sticky bomb, an infantryman facing a tank was essentially helpless. After the sticky bomb, he was dangerous. The psychological difference is immense. Furthermore, the sticky bomb influenced the development of later anti-tank weapons. The concept of a shaped charge explosive affixed directly to an armored target was not novel, but the sticky bomb's operational success in the field provided practical evidence that such an approach could work. When the Panzerfaust demonstrated the superiority of shaped charges delivered via the trajectory method, rather than through direct attachment, military theorists began to understand the fundamental principles at work. The sticky bomb's legacy is therefore not one of material success, but of demonstrating principle. It proved that unconventional approaches could work when confronted with apparently impossible problems. The weapon itself fell from use as superior alternatives became available, but the concept endured. Today, anti-tank mines and explosives still operate on the principle that shaped charges in direct contact with armor represent an effective solution to tank defense. The British Museum's collections include surviving sticky bombs, preserved as evidence of the ingenuity that emerges from desperation. The Tank Museum at Bovington maintains several examples of vehicles damaged by sticky bombs, allowing modern visitors to understand the weapon's actual effects. On that dust-covered street in Modica, James Webley completes his throw. The wooden rod has been twisted free with trembling fingers. The grenade arcs through the air with surprising speed, tumbling end over end against the brilliant Mediterranean sky. The German tank commander, alert to the possibility of attack but unable to scan every window simultaneously, does not see it coming. The grenade strikes the sloped side plate of the Panzer IV, and the beeswax coating performs exactly as designed. It adheres perfectly to the metal surface, holding firm despite the slight angle and the metal's inherent smoothness. For perhaps 3 seconds, nothing happens. The tank continues its advance. Webley has already begun running, moving away from his position with the desperate urgency of a man who understands that in 3 to 4 seconds, this location will become exceedingly dangerous. The tank commander, glancing downward at the mechanical roar of his engine, finally notices the cylindrical object affixed to his vehicle's side. For a fraction of a second, the nature of what he is seeing fails to register. Then, understanding floods through him, and he attempts to alert his gunner. But the percussion detonator does not wait for orders or reports. It functions with the absolute indifference of physics, converting chemical energy into movement, movement into detonation, detonation into a thunderous explosion that rocks the tank on its suspension. The shaped charge of the Mills bomb, designed decades earlier to maim or kill exposed infantry, now finds itself in direct contact with an anti-tank target for which it was never originally intended. The explosion punches through the side armor as though it were cardboard, and the Panzer IV's career comes to an abrupt and definitive conclusion.
The tank does not catch fire. The damage is too localized for that. But it will not move again. Its ammunition, set alight by the explosion's heat, begins to cook off inside the turret, transforming the vehicle into an inferno from which no crew member will escape. Webley, having made it to the shelter of an adjacent building, finds himself alive. Against the odds, against probability, and against every rational assessment of the tactical situation, he has succeeded. He has taken a weapon that was widely regarded as little more than an elaborate suicide device and transformed it into an instrument of victory. The tank is destroyed. The German advance at this particular point has been halted. The Panzer threat, at least for the moment, has been neutralized. This is what the sticky bomb represented. Not a solution to the problem of defeating tanks, not a weapon of sophistication or elegance, not a creation that military engineers could point to with professional pride. It was instead something far more human, a desperate improvisation that allowed ordinary soldiers to stand against overwhelming odds and occasionally, just occasionally, emerge victorious. The sticky bomb may have been stupid in conception, crude in design, and suicidal in deployment, but it was never stupid in effect. It was a British invention that represented British ingenuity at its finest and most characteristically British. Not the pursuit of perfection, but the achievement of adequacy under conditions where adequacy seemed impossible. In the end, perhaps that is the truest measure of wartime innovation. Not what you create when you have unlimited resources and unlimited time, but what you manage to accomplish when time is running out, resources are exhausted, and only imagination and determination remain.